Next up, Russ and I are going to get spooky with it and talk about Poltergeist in 4K.
And before we die from the curse after talking about Poltergeist, make sure you subscribe to the page and like the video. We'd like to see some accolades before we pass on to the other side.
Oh, God, I love it when you talk dirty.
Another classic that I feel like is getting a little bit of shaky treatment as well. One that I think you've got some strong opinions about and I'd like to talk through is Poltergeist. Also coming out September 20th on 4K from Warner Brothers in a regular, a steelbook, and an ultimate collector's edition. It's celebrating its 40th anniversary. I did go with the Zavvi version just because it's got the original box art on it in a sturdier case and not some of these other ones. So I'd like to talk about the release a little bit, but mainly we're here to talk about the movie. But it came out in 1982. Tobe Hooper, the director, but most likely Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was preparing for E.T. He was working with Tobe Hooper on a sort of ghost story idea that was supposed to follow up Close Encounter of a Third Kind. It was called Night Skies. It was supposed to be like a horror ghost story kind of thing. He was contractually unable to direct two films at the same time.
Both movies I've sort of been making together. I mean, I was cutting Poltergeist and then cutting E.T. only 3 weeks apart. So it's almost like making two movies at the same time.
Now, the movie stars Craig T. Nelson, Joe Beth Williams, and R.I.P. Heather O'Rourke, about a suburban family whose home is invaded by malevolent ghosts. 8th highest grossing film of 1982. So number 8. You want to go? I'll tell you 7 through 1. Here we go. Ready? 48 Hours. Number 7.
Better than Poltergeist.
Star Trek 2. Porky's. Rocky 3.
Poltergeist is better.
An Officer and a Gentleman.
Never saw it, but Poltergeist is better.
Coming in at number 2, Tootsie.
Tootsie's better.
Coming in at number 1, E.T. For that year, which grossed $359 million compared to Poltergeist's 76.
I'll get killed for this, but in my eyes, E.T. is equal to Poltergeist.
Yes, I believe that too.
1982, known as the Spielberg Summer. As a result of that, it's since been recognized as a horror classic, spawning 2 sequels and a remake, and now it's been reduced to showing Craig T. Nelson's ass on its 40th anniversary 4K release.
Nobody's complained until now.
Let's talk a little bit about how this movie was made, because I know that's something that, you know, you've kind of alluded to when we talked about this before, that this is Spielberg's movie, not Tobe Hooper's movie. And I kind of
I disagree, though.
Oh, you kind of have the flip.
That's not mine.
Oh,
no, Tobe
okay.
Hooper directed this. Tobe Hooper directed it. Steven Spielberg was not impressed. He was tapping him on the shoulder.
Yeah.
I feel like he pieced it together. He made it a Spielberg movie, but Tobe Hooper directed it. It's 75-25.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like you don't get a straight answer either way. It's like it's almost as like depending on who you talk to, depending on who's Toby's friend versus who's more aligned with Steven Spielberg, more, you know, that kind of stuff is kind of what I'm getting. But it's the question is who had creative control?
I have one reason for my opinion. I can name you 3 other directors that Spielberg worked, or filmmakers that Spielberg worked with around the same time who Spielberg kept working with. He never collaborated with Tobe Hooper again.
Yeah.
Where did Tobe Hooper's career? He went to Cannon after Poltergeist to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I didn't see Robert Zemeckis going to Cannon. I didn't see Joe Dante going to Cannon. I didn't see Chris Columbus going to Cannon. They all stayed with Amblin and helped Spielberg and kept coming back. Tobe Hooper got the boot. I would understand if Poltergeist was a failure, but as you just mentioned, it wasn't a failure. Mm-mm. His career as a director, Tobe Hooper, should have skyrocketed after Poltergeist, and it did not. Spielberg kept going. So that again tells me Spielberg and everyone around there thought was he wasn't up to par for our little great blockbuster movie club.
Well, you know something? I think you're right.
In 1982, this is what Spielberg was quoted as saying. Tobe isn't a take charge sort of guy.
If basically what I said.
If a question was asked and an answer wasn't immediately forthcoming, I jump in and say what we could do. Tobe would nod agreement, and that became the process. Fast forwarding a little bit, Zelda Rubinstein was interviewed, and she said that all 6 days that she was on set, Steven Spielberg was there every single day. He adjusted everything that Tobe Hooper did. In 2012, there was like some like former cast and crew that were doing like an interview or whatever, and they all stood by Hooper.
Wow.
They were kind of saying how stressful it probably was for Tobe Hooper with Spielberg hovering and like tinkering everything.
That was his first, I believe that was his first big, what did he did like Eaten Alive before that, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which by no means was a blockbuster. I mean, it became huge, but it was an independent film. Yeah. That was the first time, I believe, he was working, not only within the studio system, but with someone as high profile as Steven Spielberg.
Great segue, Russ, because in 2015, the first assistant cameraman called Spielberg the director flat out, and he said that Tobe Hooper was just happy to be there.
Wow.
I think the concept itself and the way that they execute the concept, I think, is interesting. You know, the meddling ghost in the haunted house, stealing the girl, and even the reason why they're being haunted, I feel like is pretty cool. Like, you know, housing development gets built over top of graves. They thought the graves got moved, but they just got the stones got moved. The effects, the ghosts, I think everything looked pretty good.
I'll tell you one thing that sets Poltergeist aside, like it puts it above its peers. There's one thing.
Okay.
The chair. In every other haunted movie, before and since, 75% of the movie is the characters trying to actually realize that it's ghosts. Like they're in denial that it's ghosts until they're tormented to the point of where it's not. In this movie, it's like when in the first half hour, the whole family's on board. We all know, no, this is really ghosts. We're not going to, like, you're not being tricked. This is really ghosts. And I think that's something that really benefits Poltergeist.
And they're actually happy.
There's no denial. Yeah, they're happy. They're excited.
Right.
Joe Beth Williams is like fucking stoked.
And speaking of just the family themselves, I think that's another high point. I think the family's wholesome, likable. You're worried about them. Craig T. Nelson looks great in jeans.
No, I mean, jokes about him aside, dude, I completely believe he would be married to Joe Beth Williams.
Oh, yeah,
like,
the whole
Jesus
family dynamic
Christ.
was great.
They feel like they're in love.
Like I said, you just care about whether or not they're going to make it or not. I mean, I think that was just a good element. You had to have a family like that so that you're invested more. What about just the horror itself, like the horror aspects of it?
Damn good, especially for a film that's rated PG.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Russ.
That fucking face-ripping sequence, holy shit.
It was rated R. And then Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper like appealed it and got the PG. The clown, the tree, the hallway ghost, the face ripping thing, the skeletons in the pool, like all that stuff is like pretty terrifying.
Real corpses, real skeletons.
Joe Beth Williams, trooper, took one for the team. And then lastly, one thing I'll also add is just the score. Coming from the icon himself, an iconic score, Jerry Goldsmith, Russ.
I'm having trouble even remembering the score right now, so I don't know if it's iconic. Oh, okay. I wouldn't call that iconic.
Jerry
It's a great
Goldsmith.
score.
Jerry Goldsmith's the icon.
I don't really know what to say.
After this, obviously it was a hit 4 years later.
He didn't even get Tobe Hooper
sequel.
back for the sequel.
Nope. The Other Side is the sequel. And this time, I'm going to say I did not like the sequel. And one of the reasons I also don't like it is how they kind of changed the story a little bit, where this Henry Kane guy, who's like the cult leader or whatever, he's the reason for the ghosts, not the whole we got moved onto a cemetery thing. He was below the cemetery, and he's haunting them. It's like, why are they changing the story around to fit this new mysterious villain, whatever? But
And I'm with you. I'm not a fan of 2. That scene, oh my God, when he's walking up to the door.
Oh, and the screen door?
Dude, that's terrifying to me to this day.
Then, of course, 1988, your favorite, Poltergeist 3. It arrived with Tom Skerritt and Nancy Allen.
And Lara Flynn Boyle.
Location different, cast different.
Yes, it's my favorite, but I'm under no illusion. No, the original is the objectively better film. But yes, Poltergeist 3 I enjoy more than the first 2. And I always said if they would have just called it Mirrors, if they would have just called it fucking Mirrors or Skyscraper or something like that, I think that film would be held in such higher regard.
I totally
even
agree
the
with your
things that fail in it. There is some bad acting in it, but we accept that in a lot of classic 80s horror films. So like I said, if Poltergeist 3 just had a different title, I think it would have fared so much better in the public eye.
Many do claim that this franchise is cursed due to Heather O'Rourke's death, the older sister's death, maybe even the death of Tom Skerritt's career.
With the death of Heather O'Rourke and several other stars in the Poltergeist films, supermarket tabloids immediately began running stories of the films being jinxed.
Ton of releases of this movie over time, especially, like DVD, Blu-ray, Laserdisc, you name it. And the only thing that's ever been added to it was a little short about real life poltergeists. It was one featurette that was created at some way down the line and thrown on one of these releases. A lot of bad blood, like you said. Who's coming back?
Yeah, it doesn't upset me. I mean, come on. Think about it just in your own terms, right? We're not in Hollywood. We're just regular people. Would you want to talk about a job that you worked at years ago where a little kid died that you worked with? Like, I don't think anybody wants to come back and really reflect.
But you didn't die in the first one.
They're back.
Heather O'Rourke sadly won't be back.
Well, let me throw this at you. you see all these things that Arrow's putting out, and it's like, not the director for the commentary, not the cast for the commentary. It's like film historian XYZ that wrote the book on some dumb shit. It's like, get someone like that back. Like, just give me something.
Put this segment on the release. No, you're completely right. I wasn't thinking about that.
I mean, just give me
half the time nowadays. I'm looking at these comments. I don't know who these people are. I don't care. I don't know their credentials. It could be just any random person.
Some random
film historian. What the fuck? I'm a film historian. It doesn't mean shit.
The rando that wrote the unauthorized biography of such and such story, the history. It's like, just bring them back. Who cares? Like, give me some behind the scenes anything. But they've done nothing, and this is its 40th anniversary again.
Well, like I said, I understand that. And before, it's not just like any other tragedy. This is like children dying. I understand. Like
I don't. Out September 20th.